Hey guys, welcome back. All right, as usual, per usual fashion, we're gonna start with a video. So here we go.
I find it so interesting that people don't believe in energetic frequencies or vibes or anything that they can't see. Yet they believe in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and all of these other frequencies that we can't see. And sometimes I'll say to them, like, why is that? Why don't you believe that you're emanating a frequency out and then it's going to draw in what you do or do not want? And they say, well, with Wi-Fi, I can actually see the byproduct of that. Like my phone connects, I can watch a show on TV. And so there is a physical manifestation of that. And I said, yeah, but the vibe you're giving out, there's a physical manifestation of that as well. And it's everything around you. It's your relationships, it's your home, it's your job opportunities, it's all of it. It's just that they're not linking them together. They're not seeing that the byproduct of that frequency, which we're constantly radiating out, is what's actually with us right here on the physical plane. They're directly linked.
Aha. So what do you, what do you think? What do you think?
Wow, I love this. This is exactly what I feel. I always want to use the word preach, but let's steer away from that word. But yeah, no, it's everything that my company and that both, me and my business partner, we stand for.
Yeah.
Most of, we're energetic beings and we emanate energy out into the world, and that kind of determines our outer reality.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think that she makes an interesting point with the technology because it's something that you can actually measure versus I think that this whole aspect of intuition and energy is something that people find it harder to measure because there's so many different elements to it. So
Right.
I mean, it's intriguing. So today our show is the correlation between science and intuition, like that woo-woo that you think is I don't believe in it, but you know what? Let's think about it differently. The fact that you believe in Wi-Fi, but you don't believe in energy, frequency, and vibration is intriguing, and I'm going to put it out there because, there's certain parts of it I get. Some people might find a little bit, harder to believe, but at the same time, we're going to break it down very clinically. So, guys, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Alia & Co. I am Alia Kizilbash. I'm your host, and the subject that we have today is just that, science, and we're going to correlate it to intuition because there's something there, and we have a wonderful guest here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, please introduce yourself.
Well, hi, my name is Rochelle Jenkins. I own a company called Not Your Average Psychic. I'm both a psychologist as well as a psychic medium. I will also add, I'm also a singer-songwriter, and that will become important later on, I think, in the interview, because I feel we're all creative and creators. But yeah, no, I've owned this company for 7 years now. I have a clinical background, and so does my business partner. She actually also owned her own psychology practice over in the Netherlands. That's where I'm from. I'm from Amsterdam, born and raised, and so is she. So we're both Dutchies with an international psychology and psychic practice.
I love it. I love it. So the format for this show and what I hope that you guys will take away and at least be able to kind of noodle around on in a different way, perspective-wise, science, clinical, there have been studies. We're going to break that down, and then we're going to correlate it to some ideas that, perhaps might be a little bit more, they're not as mainstream, but it's something that almost we can't deny at this point. So the first thing I do want to get into is the Libet experiment, right? So just to give kind of a backdrop to what that is that basically your brain can recognize things milliseconds before it actually happens, where your brain doesn't know what's happening as well, but your body or whatever it is, your intuition, your energy, your vibe, your frequency, whatever it is. And I'll give an example. Imagine there is something that you baked, a bunch of cookies that you baked, and you put it, on top of the oven after you took it out, and you just went to get a fork. You turn around, and then you go for it, and you touch it because you forgot it was hot, right? What happens? So does your brain actually say, does the thought have to go up to your brain and be like, hello, that was hot, so stop touching that and pull away? No, your body actually, or whatever it is, it recognizes it immediately that is harmful, right? And then your brain will actually process it a little bit later,
Right.
And the thing is, in some ways, just to kind of argue it. If you wanted to keep your hand there, you could have.
Right.
Right? You know, and it's something I think is taught, right? Where, you know, you don't want to feel pain, right?
No.
But it's something that it's like, okay, when something is hot, you pull away, right?
Right.
If it, and I'm just arguing it, if you were taught to kind of keep your hand there and just deal with the pain a little bit, and then, so I'm thinking maybe there's something a little bit more to it, and which is where I want to draw the parallel to intuition and where that comes in, because I think that the way that our society has had us kind of crush our intuition
Absolutely.
and not listen to it. So I'd love to
Absolutely.
hear what you think about that.
Wow, let's start with childhood. I feel like this society, you know, let's start with childhood. So as a child, you intuitively know a lot of things that you unlearn throughout life, right? So I would almost say children are smarter than adults. They use intuitive abilities almost all day, every day, because they don't have the verbal capacity or to actually verbalize what they
Right.
want and need. So they have to like sense their way through life. And so we were all born as beings that were meant to sense their way through life. Evolution made us like more, taught us how to speak properly and to communicate with each other, which is a great gift, but it's also a huge curse because we over-communicate, we overdo, and we underfeel and undersense. And so I feel we see that with children. You know, we see how they intuitively go about doing things and how a lot of it isn't taught by us, it's sensed by them. And not just from their own energy or from the energy around them, but also from the energy from their parents. They know what is expected of them
So-
intuitively.
So you're saying that we squash maybe our intuition, at least the ability to tap into it,
Absolutely.
goes away as we start to learn certain behaviors or are in certain environments.
It starts at the age of 7. So when you're around the age of 7, you become you. You develop that I personality. I am me and you are you. Before then, it's a little bit like murky. It's like we are all in this together, which actually that's how the world truly works. We're all in this together. We all create the universe together. And so from the age of 7, and also due to mainly society, we're taught that, I am me and you are you, so the illusion of separation starts to really kick in. And that's also when we start to conform and start to realize that this is a scary place, that we can be neglected and rejected. And so we start to learn from our world, the world around us, in sometimes in really good ways, like it helps us survive, surely. But in other ways, it really does mess with our heads, and we start to detach ourselves from our authentic selves and morph into the rest of society. And with the morphing into our environment, we lose our sense of self, our sense of soul, our sense of intuition.
Interesting. I want to get into what you've experienced as a psychologist, practicing and talking to people. I know that there's all of those clinical, the DSM, blah blah blah. I don't know, all of these manuals, and
Yes.
And just kind of scientifically the way that you are to approach therapy and talk to your patients. At what point did you start to integrate a little bit more outside of that, that energetic space, and pull in a little bit more of the intuition?
From actually the moment I start practicing, so this was actually even during my internship and while I was doing my master's in clinical psychology, I worked at St. Andrew's Hospital in London, right outside London. I don't want to say London because it was in Northampton.
But
Was it? Yeah, sorry. But because before people go, hey, it's not in London.
Yeah, exactly. But that's how you recognize it. I live out in the burbs, and
But you're still Chicago.
I am in some ways, just because some people don't know where it is, right?
Right.
But I'm from New York City, actually, for real. Actually,
For real.
from the
It's
city.
important.
Yeah. So I consider whatever. It's just so people understand. Let
The
people
London
know.
area. So I did
But you're
my
right.
part of my internship
It's a reference
there.
point.
Yes, exactly. And so this was this was a psychiatric hospital. So obviously, a lot of intense things happened there, and people with really traumatic backstories. And so one of my first jobs was to work with adolescents at an adolescent ward, and I realized the way I communicate with you right now, with your traumatic past, that's not cutting it. It's not working. I need to use my intuition, my intuitive abilities to sense what it is you need. the whole world, every single human being, one of our main needs is to feel seen. And we can't really see each other unless we use our feelings and our intuition and like really delve deep within ourselves. It isn't, we can't see other people unless we truly see ourselves first, right? So I felt like, okay, wait, I can use all these different points of reference. I can use my knowledge, or I can just help you understand that I'm seeing you. I see your hurt. I see your story. I hear you. And that helped a lot more. And, I think I'll get into that in a minute about, how I went about dealing with my own intuitive abilities throughout my life. But I was like, this is not working. So you know what? I'm going to try a different approach. Didn't tell the clinical psychologist, obviously, at the time, but and it worked, especially with the adolescent. Like they just wanted to be seen, and they wanted to know that I could understand what they were going through, like from a different lens or from a different perspective other than a psychologist.
Well, that's so interesting, though, because I do feel as though, in my experience with doctors and just in general, medical professionals, that it's also like a very regimented sort of standard operating procedure, right? Where, you come in, the patient has XYZ, you diagnose it this way, and then, you do whatever treatment or, and then you're recording it, and then, sometimes you need a referral, so you throw it out or whatever, and it's within, and it's very kind of black and white to some degree. There might be some exploration, you go and send out the lab work, but it's very regimented, right?
Absolutely.
And in some ways, there's that aspect of bedside manner, right?
Yeah.
Where you have certain physicians that people will go to because their bedside manner is so good.
Yeah.
And those that are kind of like callous and just, this and that and whatnot, I'm not saying they're bad, they're doing their job. And I also understand sometimes they're human, right? Sometimes you're tired. Sometimes like, the end of the day, you just want to make sure that you're hitting, the bullet points.
Yeah.
But compassion is also really important.
Compassion and treating the individual as an individual, meaning your story isn't the same as thousands of others going through it. And I feel that's why I became wary of diagnosing people.
Yeah.
Oh, I can give you a label, but just because you meet these criteria doesn't mean that you have that exact same disorder. It's weird,
Right.
And I think that we lost touch of that in this society of, seeing the individual for who and what they are.
Right.
We're all so unique.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
And I think unique in terms of, our mental, emotional state, but also our physiology. The chemicals, the guts, the food, functional medicine, what you're eating, what you're not eating, how it affects your happiness levels and, all of that. So I think that, as we are kind of like, going through the weeds of it, it seems that there is more kind of clarity that is coming. And there are things that we're also accepting that we weren't. But getting back to your point about being empathetic and learning and kind of more identifying and having that human feel seen, what was that? What did that entail?
I feel and this is what intuition does. It kind of like traces where this person is coming from, what the true and the full story is. So you have a story that you tell with your cognitive abilities, but your intuition goes deeper, goes beyond that point. And you can sense into, hey, but I can also feel that you're upset in this way or in that manner. And if you bring that into the story, if you bring your own intuitive abilities into the story as a therapist, you're able to give a much better type of care to these people.
Yeah.
So, and that's what intuitive does. You go, I can hear what you're saying, but I feel like there's also something missing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to add this on. Am I right in thinking that there's also an issue that you've had with your mom? And that's how I use it, even in sessions that I do with people today.
And I think that is also something that you're not, and I think that there's also something that you're not kind of like internalizing, right? Like as a human, like we don't internalize a lot of things where like, it's like, okay, I know that all of these things happened to me. Perhaps maybe there might have been some childhood traumas or my birth order is number 3, I'm the last. So, a lot of times, a lot of similar things happen to an individual that is within that kind of like experience or scenario, or somebody that grew up in an immigrant family that had to kind of relocate, or somebody that maybe lost their parent, or, somebody that might be giving off like maybe too kind of strong of a vibe where it's like they're guarded, right?
Right.
And the thing is, so we as us being in ourselves sometimes can't see it.
Oh,
and other people can
majority of
see
the
it
time.
immediately,
Absolutely. The majority of the time, I will say.
Yeah.
And I will also say unawareness is the biggest poison in this society.
Yeah.
In today's society, is unawareness. And with your intuition, you make the unaware aware for yourself, but also for everyone around you.
Oh.
You know, I was just thinking on the way here to this podcast, I was in the car just going, what's the biggest issue? What is the biggest issue? It's unawareness, not being aware of your pain, of your trauma, of the way you think and feel. And with our intuitive abilities and also helping each other with that, we're able to make the unaware aware. And with awareness comes clarity, right? Comes peace, because we're aware. And when we're aware, we can also, you know, we can dissolve like stagnant energy and blockages, you know? So it's so important. It's so important that we become more aware as a society, as people.
Yeah. So how do you think somebody who is not aware can start to become aware?
By taking themselves more seriously, and especially what they feel. So, you know, how do I connect stronger with my own intuitive abilities? By taking your emotions more seriously. You know, your emotions are your compass. They are your roadmap in life. We have been taught by our parents, by our school, pain should be avoided. Pain should be suppressed. Pain should be blocked. It's a bad thing. It's an enemy. Pain is your roadmap. Is your gateway to clarity. And so that's also what I help people understand. You want to understand your pain. You want to understand the full scale of your story. Your trauma is your purpose. You know, so it's not just your roadmap, but you endure certain things in life because your soul or your being, however, you know, I'm very careful with the words I use here, but, you know, we are meant to do something with our stories and with what we have experienced in life. So, and that's the next step. But first, it's by taking your emotions more seriously, by being less scared of our negative feelings.
Right.
But what if our school system be like, hey, we're going to take 1 hour a day out to just feel, to feel a way through our emotions and to understand they're not our enemy, they're our roadmap. And to understand that it's okay to digest them and to give them a voice and to share them with the people around you. You know, if you ask anyone around you, how are you? The majority of the people will go, I'm fine. But we're not.
No.
Because no person is actually always doing okay.
No.
The majority of the time we're doing actually pretty crappy as adults. So why are we not sharing that more? And why are we not feeling, you know, liberating ourselves?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I do feel as though a lot of people become guarded. There's a lack of trust that is a big thing where, for example, you know, and emotions, the idea of suppressing emotions comes in to some degree because sometimes the emotions are erratic and misplaced, you know. If someone's too sensitive and they cry all the time, it's like, oh my God, don't say anything around her, you know, like, or somebody that just like is ready to kind of like be up in arms and argue, you know, or somebody that just gets angry all the time, or somebody, you know, anger issues, etc. You know, and I think the way society labels it is that you become that personality. That person is angry or anxious all the time, or worrywart, or, you know, just kind of like, you know, flaky or whatever, you know, like there's certain labels that we give. But the thing is, though, those emotions are emotions that person still feels, right?
Absolutely.
What the kind of like difficult part of it is that if you're experiencing X emotion, that's valid. That feeling is valid. It should stay, but it's what you do afterwards, what you do actionably that dictates that crazy,
Absolutely.
crazy person.
No, you are
quote
responsible
unquote.
for your emotions, right?
Right.
And I think the first step in like being more responsible for your emotions, becoming stoic almost, I would say, is by becoming aware. Why am I reacting or am I being reactive right now? That too stems from pain and trauma.
Right.
And, you know, I was also feeling, there's such a heaviness around the word trauma and pain, but every single human being has endured some type of trauma. Just like every single human being that I will have in front of me as a client, I can diagnose you. I can get the DSM out there and be like, there you go, histrionic, well, bipolar, it's terrible, right? Because at the end of the day, we've become so wary about us having experience or experiencing pain and trauma that we just become confused about our own existence. And that's where you get caught up in becoming like, having hysterical reactive responses, even and especially within politics, right? When you see politicians, you go, oh, I would love to just have one conversation with you.
Right.
Because your actions and your reactions, they stem from something. And if you would help me or someone else would, if you would let them, allow them to help you become more aware of yourself, we would avoid a lot of conflict in this world.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
In our relationships, too.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I think just to kind of delve and scratch
Yes.
at that, kind of a little bit more, just so I think our viewers can understand exactly, like you mentioned trauma, right? Trauma, as we're taking away, not every trauma is like, you go to the ER, one person has a heart attack or whatever, and the other one might have broken their leg. You're going to take the person that has the heart attack first, but it doesn't mean that your leg's not broken. You still
this
have
is
that,
beautifully said.
right?
Beautifully said,
and
yeah.
so like we all have kind of like these things, right? I mean, for example, God forbid, there are children that have been abused in some format, whether it be physically, emotionally, sexually, God forbid, like just not any, I just wouldn't want that to happen to anybody, but unfortunately, that is the nature of our society. Yeah. But again, drawing to the parallel of the ER example, you become who you are earlier in life, that you didn't even have to go through that. Your parents just could have immigrated to America. And that could have been something that you experienced within your environment that allowed for you to deal with certain stressors in a very different way, before you were kind of like, you began to question the essence of who you were, right?
Absolutely.
So it becomes very hard, though, for just on the average person, because our mind is always out shooting. There's all thoughts. Not every thought is accurate, but they're just thoughts coming and just floating around. We don't
As
even
they
know.
should.
Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what they're meant to do.
absolutely, and
Yeah.
they're there. But it becomes very difficult to kind of like sort through the weeds and find out what am I feeling, and also why am I feeling that? Because if I already knew how to identify my traumas, then I would already know what my traumas
No,
were.
absolutely.
So how does one start to do that? How do you start that?
Well, I would definitely not recommend doing this alone and by yourself. So let's also normalize seeking help and talking to one another more frequently about what it is that we feel, instead of going about it like, hey, everything's going fine in my life. How about you? Not to shove anyone under the bus here, but I lived in the UK for like 3 or 4 years, and I did notice everything was fine. And there was almost like a huge fear around, people saying, I'm actually not okay. So let's start with that, with allowing yourself to not be okay. And that it's very normal to not be and feel okay. Because we start to freak out because we've been conditioned that way once we start feeling sad or angry or fearful. And if you know that it's a very normal part of life on earth, you start getting less like caught up in it. Be like, you know what, I'm like a child. I always reference a toddler, a toddler tantrum. How toddlers go about digesting their emotions is beautiful. I wish we could still do it as adults. We can't, because it kind of be odd. But they just, they throw a tantrum, they lie on the ground, they kick and scream with their legs, and they release that energy. They release the emotion. Now, as adults, we don't, just because we grow up, it's not like we work differently. We're not wired differently just because, our limbs are longer and we have mature jobs, et cetera. We still feel all these things. We don't always have to know the story. I think also one of the reasons I was done with normal psychology is because I was always the one having to validate someone else for their feelings. Yes, you're right. You're right in feeling sad because it wasn't fair that your dad. How is that up to freaking me?
Yeah.
You're sad because you're sad, and that's okay. Just like a 2-year-old says to themselves, I'm sad, bye-bye.
Yeah.
So first, it's all about validation and feeling safe within your emotions, because you've now have reconditioned, relearned yourself, hey, emotions, intense emotions are actually very healthy to have. The more I validate them, the more I digest them, the more I'm willing to feel them all throughout my body, the more clarity I will get. So it's so simple, but because we have been so conditioned to suppress and avoid pain, we forgot.
Absolutely. Yeah. The suppression of your emotions, but all of it. It's true. It's like, why do I have to keep continuously pushing it down? Because it's something, and also validating, you need to learn to self-validate, because you're absolutely right.
Self-validate.
It's like you're going to someone else to tell you that everything is okay, and then you leave, be like, oh, she said it was okay, so it's okay, But the thing is, that issue is just going to keep coming back. And I also feel like with your emotions, you feel them for a reason. They're valid, they happened, but again, it's how you kind of, but there was a study, that Harvard study, that, after 90 seconds, if you continuously feel your emotions, they eventually, like, that energy begins to subside.
Yeah.
But if you don't, and you keep suppressing them, you're in this, like, emotional loop. Where it just never goes away, where people can be depressed for years, where, and I'm not saying it's like a split second thing, you feel it for 90 seconds and the problem is completely gone, but there's like a certain amount of self-regulation that I think that we as a society are not taught.
Nope.
And I think that also as a society, we're the ones that are saying, oh, it's shameful or bad to be acting out, or, or whatever, or having emotions, because okay, and here's my question. Everyone feels emotions differently, right?
Yep.
What might make one person angry may not make one as angry. So how does that work?
Or if two people are exposed to the exact same trauma, one person may be a lot more traumatized than the other person.
Yeah.
Seen that plenty of times as well.
How does that happen?
Because we're all wired differently. We all look pretty similar, but we're wired very, very differently. And I think also what we have forgotten is that we are all unique individuals. We're all like a piece of the puzzle. And so we walk around going, well, you feel what I feel, you should feel what I feel, you should understand what I'm saying. No, I won't. I'm using my own reference, my own point of reference to understand what you're saying, And so that's why it's so important that we start to become more aware of ourselves, aware of our feelings, aware of who we are, in order to, become a more loving society. So I think that's where it's, that's where it's very important.
Yeah. Just to shift gears a little bit and getting back to kind of like us being able to understand where we are from a scientific perspective, I want to mention a different experiment. I think it was a Damasio experiment where basically there were these deck of cards that were dealt out to a large subset of individuals, where two of the cards, when they would pull them, kind of showed low reward and low punishment, right?
Oh, yeah.
But then the other two had very high reward, but then also really drastic punishment, right? And so as like, and what was measured was, just kind of like their reaction and, just the energy, whatever, like that, anything that they could, and I, forgive me if I'm wrong, but they did kind of like have monitors or whatever that gauged a response, right? And then also obviously like, taking like a diagnostic after, but they found that as these cards were being dealt out, the individual who was being kind of like receiving them could, before the high-risk cards would come out, would kind of intuitively start to feel it. They know, they would guess it. They'd be like, and then they were pretty much on, it was pretty accurate. And, and it's kind of funny. So I read about that. So that goes to show that maybe there's something that we do know that perhaps maybe we've suppressed, right? And especially in this environment of like so much data, so much drowning information, so much news, constant, that in some ways we need a little bit of isolation, meditation, or deprivation to be able to actually kind of hone into our intuition.
Absolutely.
And I'll give a personal example. So after I read that study, my kids needed to get a passport or whatever. So I go to the passport office and I'm like waiting online, and there's like a bunch of, it's like the DMV. There's like a bunch of people at the stalls or whatever. And I was just like, let me see how my intuition does. And so I'm like, I'm going to guess which person is going to like, call out my name, right? So for my turn. And so I'm like, okay, well, I know it's this one. Like there was this woman that was like, right, and you hope you get like the nice one or whatever. Like, I guess, and I'm like, no, it's that guy. That guy over there.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be her. And so, and the thing is, but then I guessed wrong. I was like, no, it's that guy.
Yeah.
But who was it? It was that woman. Okay. And it was strange because I'm like, what am I blocking out? I need to learn to trust whatever that was more but I don't know how.
Right.
So I'd love to hear what you think about that and how a person can kind of start to hone in, especially in lieu of that experiment, but then also I'm just my experience, and I'm sure that you've experienced that many times in your life, you've seen
Right.
people. How does one start to listen to themselves?
Yeah, well, again, it really does start with understanding the self better. And so remember, yes, you are, and this is just coming from my perspective, right? But, you're a human being second and an energetic being first. So everything is energy. And once you start sort of like deliberately detach yourself from your humanness a little bit more, you start to get into the void, into the higher dimensions of consciousness. But it does have a couple of things that, ingredients that are necessary to be able to detach. In that moment in time, you experienced alignment, in alignment with your higher awareness.
Oh.
You don't know what happened. It could be something subconscious or consciously where you were like, hey, maybe because you actively were like, hey, I want to know, I want to find this out. A lot of time that does not work and help. Or it was because, 5 minutes before then, you were just realigned with your soul because you digested an emotion, or you did something that instilled you with joy. There are several ingredients that are necessary for you to strengthen that intuitive ability, to strengthen the connection with your energetic self.
Yeah.
So it's not just one thing, but I will say, if you realize that time is not even a real thing, it's a human construct as well, and you let go of the cognitive, notion of, I'm solely a human being, I'm an energetic being, everything in and around me is energy. You can also travel in and back in time, So perhaps you had a future life experience.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I do believe that there's a lot of physicists that do say that time is a construct,
Yes.
right? It's almost kind of like, and especially people that have had near-death experiences, they go into this space of, and there's a book that I read by, I think it was Dr. Moody, and what he does is this analysis of like thousands and thousands of people who have had near-death experiences across all kinds of, faiths and, ethnicities and locations. And at the end of the day, he kind of targeted the fact that there are certain experiences people report to have, regardless of their belief system, that might be the case. And so the experience of time also becomes a little bit unusual as what they report,
very
right?
much so.
Where
Yeah.
it's kind of like, if you were writing a book, right? As the author of a book, you have written this book, you could flip to the back, you could flip to the beginning, you could open up the page that was directly before the middle, and you can kind of like look at it that way. So they kind of like, explain it in terms of that. So that's interesting. So tapping into this, and now I want to segment into the juicy part, where, kind of you open the door to it a little bit, tapping into the intuition. And, you being a psychologist, there was something that happened, or what has happened in your life that allowed for you to have these experiences. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit of that history.
Well, it actually we're talking about time and time travel, so that's what that was about. In my early years of life, I was, just to explain this in a very simple way, I was living in this human avatar. I was living this life, but I was also on some other plane of existence, living a very different life.
How did you know that?
Well, I didn't until I voiced it, and until I started to share that with my environment, and they were all telling me, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah,
I have no-
elaborate. Because I feel
Yes,
like you had the experience, but and I know that for a lot of people that hear it, they're like, "What?" But then a lot of things we don't have the language for. Right?
Exactly, because I was 3 years old, 2
Yeah.
or 3 years old. And it probably happened beforehand, because again, when we're still very little, we're very strongly connected with the universe still. So anyway, but around the age of 3 is when we start having a consciousness. So we are not really conscious of anything happening before the age of 3. And so when I was 3, I remember having these very vivid, lucid dreams of being in a different life. Okay. I was a man, I was working in a factory. I would go to work every day. It was pretty boring. And that's also where my life was ended. So I don't know what I experienced there, but I remember dying in the factory. I also remember being in the US.
Oh, wow.
And so another strange thing for me was my first language is Dutch, but my English has always been pretty good. And that's, yes, usually hugely to do with friends as well, may I add, but also to do with the fact that I just spoke the language.
Oh.
And so my parents were just obviously a little freaked out about this because I would talk about this life and I would,
You'd
talk
speak
and
in a different language? Like you
I would, yeah.
speak in English?
Yeah, I spoke English from the age of 4 or 5 years old,
Okay,
and I, not like as fluently as this, but definitely a lot more fluent than I should have.
Was it taught to you, or
No,
you just
not
kind
at
of-
all. No.
Really?
born
Wait,
right-
hold on. So you did they teach it in school?
No.
Ha-
No.
and-
I mean, there's English. We have English television,
Okay,
sure.
okay.
But I mean, still, the majority of the cartoons, everything is in Dutch,
oh,
and so my
wow.
English has always been good.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say really good because I will never
No,
never speak
no.
like a
Well,
native. But
yeah.
overall, it's
Yeah.
pretty decent.
Yeah.
And so, that was strange. It's the same thing for my sister, by the way. So both her and I, we would speak English to one another, and that was just odd to
Yeah.
my parents as well. So that was interesting. But having these vivid memories, or I would not even call them memories. They were just, I was somewhere else as well with my energy.
Yeah.
Years later, I found out there was this book. I forgot the title, and I should have looked it up. I'm sorry about that, but it's about a collection of children's stories who have had past life experiences.
Okay. Yeah.
And so a lot of that is also related to the trauma that they'll still experience in this life because they'll take that from that life to this life.
Oh, wow.
Now, I wouldn't say that necessarily happened to me. I just remembered it vividly. Like I could have, if you had given me pen and paper then, if I was able to write back then, I probably would have known my name, where I lived. I just remember it being around the Massachusetts area
Yeah. Oh,
in
wow.
the U.S. So it was still pretty specific.
Yeah.
And I was always wearing this brown, ugly suit.
Okay.
That I now have an opinion. I was like, why would you wear that suit? But apparently it was important for me to remember this or to have this experience. And this lasted for years. And even now, when I tell you this, I can go back there. I can see this factory and the grass around it. And so that was also when I realized, hey, I can see more, to reference the kid from The Sixth Sense, I can see dead people.
Yeah.
So I saw more than just people who were alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's such an interesting, that's so unique. And I think it also depends on the audience that you're telling this to, right? Because I think in Western societies, there's a lot of suppression when it comes to all of these kinds of the sixth sense, or, you have all these YouTube shows where let's go into the haunted house, and whatever, in downstate Illinois, whatever, this house was haunted, and the witch trials and this and that and whatever. There is a historical something, these anomalies are something, right? But in Eastern cultures, they're a given.
Absolutely.
They're a given, and in some ways they understand that there's an unexplainable, right? In some ways I think, but again, when it comes to things like numerology, astrology, palmistry, tarot, and all of these different kinds of readings that people woo, 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 whatever,
Yeah.
In some ways, just to push back, I would say, why do so many cultures, religions, maybe the people that do believe, you have in Hinduism, or even I think that there are certain kind of aspects across culturally that that they why do they all cross culturally to some degree find some interest in these things, So if it's represented many, in different places and different ethnicities and different cultures or whatnot, perhaps maybe it could be something to understand in a different way, right? Because I give this example about the idea of the Wright brothers, right? The Wright brothers, if you went to that village the week before they had their first flight and you asked those two guys who build bicycles, are you guys going to, throw up some metal in the air and is it going to be floating around? They would laugh in your face because it was everything against the scientific beliefs at the time. There were research studies then that was no, that is totally not possible. Yet a week later, they put a chunk of metal into the air, right? And I think though, and whereas this is where my belief system comes in, is that we have not discovered everything.
We have not.
So, in some ways, perhaps we don't have the language to explain certain things, but we can explain Wi-Fi. I mean,
there you go.
You can explain
AI.
Bluetooth. You can explain all of that.
Yeah.
So perhaps maybe, I think, instead of coming with a let me just shut it down sort of mindset, I think that perhaps maybe we need to approach things with a little bit more curiosity. I mean, I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Absolutely. So it is also important to note that my mom is from Indonesian descent. So my father still currently lives in Bali. He's mixed Indonesian Dutch. And so that was definitely part of my cultural upbringing. Born and raised in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, but at the home, there, it was very much like the Indonesian culture. And it is definitely much more accepted, not necessarily by my parents, may I add. So for me, it was a big struggle to come to terms with the fact that this was my reality and that I experienced these things. But we always praise ourselves, especially in the Western society, that we are this, the evolution and technology, and we are the smartest and the brightest because of science. And I actually feel that these Eastern society or countries, and with they tap into an ancient wisdom, and this ancient wisdom is always connected with a higher intelligence. They always merge that with a higher intelligence, right? So it's actually much more intelligent. So if you go back to ancient Egypt, I for a fact know that they were able to build those pyramids because they used their higher intelligence. Everyone is able to tap into their higher intelligence, but in order to do that, you have to kind of push aside your rationality. So rationality is if I'm rational, I'm doing things the right way. Rationality is the biggest blockage in the brain.
What is rationality even?
Well, it's look, keeping your head screwed on and things have to make sense and add up.
Yeah, but that's subjective, I still feel.
Right. Even just, in spite of all the science that is out there, it's still limited. Like our brain, it's limited. And so this higher intelligence, this ancient wisdom is much richer. And it's much more, it gives us much more answers to things that we want to have answers to. But we have to bypass our rationality, our rational brain.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and this is kind of a silly example, but you're absolutely right. I went to Japan, and I like the beauty stuff over there. So I'm like, I'm going to try some certain things. Things are gate kept. There are a lot of things in the U.S. that, from a corporate perspective, but then just in general, it's what is rational? It's like there's the average of everything that everyone believes in is rational. Is that what it is? Because it may not be right, but I did a bunch of this acupuncture, and like they had this one treatment where basically they make your face more symmetrical.
Ooh.
Right? And so well, basically this guy, there was this
Booking
metal
it
plate.
tomorrow.
Oh my God, right, exactly.
Happening.
This metal plate, he goes and stands on top of me, and then he's pushing my bones, and then he shows me a before and after, and my face was more symmetrical. I was like, oh my God. And that's something that in the US, it's reconstructive surgery, your insurance, blah, 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 blah. Not that I need it, but it's just fun to try those sort of things.
Absolutely.
But the thing, so I think that that's a wisdom that has been there for a very long time,
Thousands of
that,
years.
that a lot of times maybe within certain societies, things are gate kept, in some ways.
Insane.
Yeah.
If I go to a Balinese healer, if things that I've was taught in my culture, it's why is it not being taught here in the Netherlands, in the US even? Such a shame. And I feel, what is rationality? It's basically based on what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
And there's so much more happening beyond the point of visibility, and that
Oh, absolutely true.
that we experience.
Absolutely. Just even to the smallest, putting a pin in something, I grind my teeth. It, puts just that one little thing that isn't very visible. So I think that, we have all these tangible examples, but at the same time, what we can't explain is what we don't believe,
Well, that's it.
Which
we
is
can't explain is what we don't believe.
Absolutely. And I think that with, to your point, is with all of these small things, the things that we don't see, for example, another clinical experiment, the idea of feeling the vibes or the energy or the surroundings of people. I mean, as women, right? It's a given, or it's well known, is that when women menstruate, if you hang out with a bunch of girls you eventually sync up with them.
Yeah.
Or just the idea of the vibe or energy is if you go into a new place and there might have been a fight that just happened, but then you walk into the room and nobody's really doing anything, but you sense. You sense that something happened. You're not really sure. The energy is off. What does that mean, the energy is off? Perhaps, I think that there are and I was having this discussion beforehand, where it's like, maybe the fact that you can't identify exactly, is it your body movements, is it the fact that, like, somebody's heart rate is up, or the lump in the throat personally, or, just to identify kind of like microaggressions, or even just to sense somebody's upset. To be honest, if they were sitting here, I wouldn't even have to look at their face to some degree, but I might. And I don't know how to really make it like scientific, but you sense when somebody's off.
I don't think you can make it
Yeah.
scientific. I think that's also, maybe that's not something that we should want to achieve or attain. But there's two answers, I feel, to this. Is first, you witness the world around you based on your inner reality. So we witness and experience whatever, that's indicated or that's fueled by our inner reality. So if you go into a room and it feels off, that might also be your own vibration just because you feel off.
That's so
right?
interesting.
That's one.
Okay.
Now, secondly, emotions linger. If everything is energy, so are emotions. And so you can step into a room where there's just been a huge fight, and those emotions will still linger. If you're an empath, so if you are sensitive, intuitive, you'll pick up on that, right? So it's a bit of both, I would say. But I also feel sometimes we'll look at a situation, we'll look at a person, and we'll go, "You're angry." It's because, wait, that's your inner reality. You haven't digested something. You haven't felt a certain emotion, and that makes you more reactive or more vigilant with that. To scan your own emotions for that same feeling.
Interesting. And that's the beauty of what you're saying, as I'm hearing it, is that we are all different human beings who have experienced a lot of different traumas, in a very general way, extreme versus non, but then also what we're eating and consuming and who we're hanging out with, and kind of like our social media diet, our information diet, like what you're consuming. Like it's so nuanced to twins. Just even physiologically, like, if you're identical twins, you still have very different, like you could be completely different, because not every one person is going to experience all of the same things, because you have twins that have completely different personalities, which is so intriguing. But at the end of the day, as humans, we do all have one brain, right?
One brain.
Yes, and and just to say is also physiologically, if you're a human, you have a brain, right? Or if you're an animal, you have a brain, and which is where I kind of want to segue into. And I know we started with Wi-Fi and sensing, technology and Bluetooth and whatnot. I do want to draw a parallel to artificial intelligence, and just the way that AI has been basically it mimics the brain. That's what it was built to do. It is built to mimic the brain, much more powerful. I mean, you have like all of these kind of like, the GPUs and the energy, but essentially what was the core crux of what the, what the purpose of AI is, the mind, right? And so if you think about, like, for example, if you are standing in your dining room and all of a sudden you have a thought, right? And you get surprised that you pull up your phone, that all of a sudden an ad shows up with something that you were thinking, right?
Right.
And
very scary.
It is very scary because if you don't understand kind of like, the technical kind of mechanics behind it, it's alarming. It is extremely alarming to see things that it's predicting things that you don't even know you needed or that you hadn't even thought of. But as a technologist, it makes a lot of sense for me, right?
Yeah.
Where basically it's all about collecting data, and what it does is it makes inferences, it makes educated guesses based off of the data that it receives. So you might be scrolling for chocolate, you might be scrolling for, I'm sad or whatever. Maybe you're, kind of it's that time of the month for you.
Yeah.
And then the ad pops up for chocolate.
Yeah.
So it's going to put two and two together, and then, but in the same way, as AI is there built to basically mimic the human brain, why is intuition not the same? Why do people get shocked when our bodies tell us that, hey, this could be happening,
Very valid,
and it's
yeah.
like, I kind of suppress it, but, I feel like this is going to happen, or, and essentially we as humans, if AI is mimicking us, we're way more powerful. So in the age of AI, to some degree, don't you feel as though you should channel into your intuition more? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's very important. I very much believe that also, if intuitive abilities go hand in hand with your emotional state of being, right? Because it's all about becoming more aware of your emotions, digesting them more thoroughly, to, have a deeper connection with self. And that's what strengthens your intuitive abilities. You can also kind of predict things, you can start to understand who and what it is you truly are, what you truly need. And so you become your own AI in that sense, because you can go, okay, well then I probably need a retreat in 6 months' time.
Yeah.
Or then now that I have, digested and understand my emotions, and I am honing in on my intuitive abilities more, I realize that I'm capable of doing this, this, and that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you become a more advanced version of yourself.
But all to your point is awareness.
Awareness.
I think that, and perhaps the reason why we kind of create this woo-woo dynamic around it is because it's not something you can tangibly measure, whereas AI is computational and, all the math is there and you can, like show your work and it's okay, that's what the work is. Not always, most generally people be like, oh, how'd that happen? But like if you're in the space, you realize you know how it happens, at lots of data, large magnitudes, but the brain is even more, I would say, so in some ways, like that awareness component, unaware versus getting aware, how would you say to tap in the age of AI, to tap into your intuition so that you are more aware?
Well, again, I have to go back to my point as to, allowing yourself to feel what needs to be felt.
Yeah.
But also to bypass the rational brain, what we talked about earlier. I would say designing your life in a more illogical way than you've allowed yourself to do before.
Illogical, you said?
Illogical, yeah.
Ooh.
I say this a lot to a lot of clients.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay, if you have been taught to do something a certain way in order for you to feel safe and sane, but stuck, safe, sane, but stuck, how about we start going about things in a more illogical way? And so during this age of AI, where I feel like we are all being asked, it's kind of like a little push, like, hey, if they understand you so well, let's override that even more by understanding the self even better, right? Because I think it's like I don't know much about AI. I wish I did know a little bit more about AI.
Well,
but
I got you on the AI part, which is where I think the intuition really comes in.
Yeah,
and you're
for
saying
sure.
all the right things. So,
there you go.
Yeah.
Good. No, but I also feel like it's an invitation for all of us, not to out clever or to outsmart it, but to understand, hey, I like a nudge of trying to understand the self better. Like understand the self better. If AI knows you, please let this be a nudge for you to become even more aware of self.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's why.
And
it's
that's
so good.
exactly it, is that what AI and how we can make sure that we're actually tapping into our humanness.
Yeah.
That's something, it does not feel. It does not have the experiences that you've had. It does not have gut health.
Nope.
It doesn't feel.
No.
It's just a sequence of numbers. And
Lucky
when
them,
you,
by the way.
Right.
Gut health, yeah.
But like when you're putting into ChatGPT and you're trying to find it to be your therapist, and you think that it feels like, you hear those stories of people that fall in love with AI,
Yes, I
and
have
which is
seen
kind of like
that.
scary to some degree,
Yeah.
but they don't feel anything toward it. Doesn't feel anything towards you, which is where I think that we as humans thrive, right? Because exactly what you're saying is the emotional intelligence that we really, really need to tap into. Understanding, like, and being creative, the way, and I'll give an example, is that with data, because that's all it works on is data. It's actually sweeping all over the internet and pulling random averages of all of the different kinds of data. And if it keeps going, it's just going to keep continuously giving you the average of all the information that is out there, which is why creativity and thinking outside of the box is so important. Do you want to think in averages? Do you want your brain to become an
Yes.
average?
Yeah.
And which is why it's so important to use your intuition
Yes.
and kind of try to harness it. So my question to you, and we've talked about the awareness, sitting still with your feelings, in terms of getting help, right?
Yeah.
What's a daily practice for you? Like, what does your day look like so that you know, and being illogical, which I totally love because
that logical route of your soul is what I always call it. So I wake up, I never leave the bed without doing a meditation first. Not because it's spiritually responsible, but it's because I just know my day I'll have a better day. I'll be more aware of what I feel. I'll be more aware of the self, of what I need. And that's always a good way to start your day. Of course, you know, within my line of work, in the first hours of the day, I'll do my first sessions with people. That does help me get into that alignment with the higher dimensions or the higher frequencies of consciousness. But a really big part, and I feel like that's why I started off introducing myself also as a creator, as a singer-songwriter. I feel we are all creators. You know, we're all meant to be way more creative than we are allowing ourselves to be. Why? Because creativity doesn't make sense. It's a waste of my time. It's a waste of my space, and that's we do such a disservice to ourselves in that way, because we are all creators, you know, and so tapping into your creativity is also a really, really important element in connecting with the higher realms. And I work in the music industry as well, and all the producers and all the other songwriters that I've worked with from all over the world, I will say when we create, we channel, so we tap into the higher frequencies. You have to in order to bring, you know, ideas and manifest them into this world.
Interesting. And so that's amazing that you use that creative outlet for yourself. And where would you say that you can get most creative? Like, you know, like, is it because of the meditation? Where do you get into your flow state?
A flow state, I feel like the majority of the time I'm not in my flow state, because we have, you know, our loud human brain overrides our flow state all the time. And I feel I just bring acceptance to that instead of being, you know, like a lot of gurus, they'll be like,
Get there.
get to the flow state. I be my human suit in this avatar. I am meant to have highs and lows throughout my day. And by acknowledging and accepting that, I don't get necessarily into a flow state, but into a state of acceptance and a state of peace with whatever is, you know, what is, and with my being.
Right.
And so I think that's really important. I am also really done, also just to go to the spiritual industry, I love the fact that you all want to get everyone into that higher consciousness, but I'm also living my life on earth. I can't keep that up all day. It's a lot of pressure. How about we just acknowledge what it is that we're going through, which is the most important ingredient, again, for reconnecting with our intuitive abilities, fully acknowledging the human experiencing and accepting it, finding acceptance. That's not always possible. Sometimes we go through hardship, and in that moment in time, it's too difficult to just go, I'll accept this. But just bringing awareness to those feelings that, you know, that brings up and they bring about, that's just all that it needs.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that sometimes people try to control bad things from happening to them, you know?
Yeah.
You know, lots of bad things might have happened to them before. What's bad, right?
Yeah.
But I think, you know, and maybe this is at least from my life experience, you know, it's like driving around. I mean, driving around and like, you know, you're late, right? So there's like traffic signal after traffic signal after, you know, and then you find out that if you had gotten there any sooner, like there was like some accident on that road, or you could have been, you know. So in some ways, we're supposed to be exactly where we're supposed to be.
Always.
And it's enriching us to some degree. It's like, you know,
really
imagine
is.
not having any experiences. Usually the people I meet with the most horrific experiences are some of the most just kindest, sweetest,
Absolutely.
well-adjusted people that I've ever met. So
going back to, they turned their hardship into purpose.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what we're all meant to do. You don't just experience things because you meant to experience them, and that's the end of the story. You're meant to literally write your story, written from it, whether it's like an actual physical book, or it's because you become a psychologist, or you become an artist, or you do something else. But it always wants to be funneled into something, and that's why I feel like it's also a really key element into also digesting emotions, is to funnel it into something and realizing it wasn't for nothing. You know, I didn't just experience this because I just had to experience it, and that's it. I've dealt with people and I still do, from all walks of life. People who have lost their children. I do a lot of end-of-life care. You know, I meet people at the worst, you know, at their worst. And I love it, because it's actually when the going gets super, super rough that we gain awareness and that we gain the clarity about life, about everything. and things start to fall into place. And so
Yeah.
sometimes we also, and that's why I started the podcast with, it's your roadmap. Pain is your roadmap.
Yeah.
It's always guiding you towards something or steering you away from somewhere where you don't need to be in life. And so that also makes it easier for you to bring acceptance to whatever you're going through in life.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. Last question before we go. Any takeaways? Like, I mean, what do you want people to know? And if they need to get help or they want to be more aware or find out more or, because I think it's a journey, right?
It definitely is,
It's
yeah.
very hard to jump in. If you're not ready for it, if you don't see it, you can't force yourself to see it. So I'd
Maybe you
love
don't want to.
Yeah, and maybe
Yeah.
you don't want to. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how somebody can get started.
Yeah, so I would say look at your life, and first you look at how you design your life right now, right? What does your schedule look like? Can we bring about any necessary changes? You're an ever-changing being. Whoever you were an hour ago, you no longer are right now. So you're constantly changing. That's the only constant in this life, is change. On a physical level, on a cellular level, on a mental level, on a spiritual level. So you're constantly changing. That means that your static schedule, so something that's really stuck every morning at 7 a.m. I go for a run. How about tomorrow we don't? How about tomorrow you go dancing? How about instead of 1 p.m. is when I play squat? Let's not. How about we change it up? Allow yourself to change it up in your own life. Start small and big, right? So we start with very small, we implement small changes, and that really, they bring about big waves in your life, positive waves. So allow change in your life. Secondly is understanding that you are more than this human vessel. You're an energetic being and you live here, but you have this whole energy in and around you. You're being taken care of. And so how do you, again, what is something that you're overlooking? What is an emotion that you're overlooking? That is an emotion that you're not digesting fully. Is there someone you can reach out to figure this out together? Again, I'm not, I would never advocate going through everything by yourself. I feel like this has become such a lonely society where everything is supposed to be done by ourselves, in ourselves. I have to be able to do this by myself. No, you don't. So reach out and seek out whoever, if you feel like someone, it's your vibe, like you and I met and I felt like,
I felt it immediately.
You're my vibe.
Exactly.
We can be friends.
Yes.
Follow that.
Yeah.
Follow the intuitions that you already get here and there. Take them more seriously. Now, also, I own a psychic school, right? So, and that's
I love it.
And whatever I see, you do not, you believe, you receive what you believe. So start believing more. Start allowing yourself to believe in the dreams that you had when you were 4 years old. Be like, you know what? If you're 45 and you still want to be a singer, dream that you're allowing yourself to be that singer. What you receive what you believe. And as a child, you believe everything. And so that's why they experience a much more universal wisdom in and around them. That's just, if I go back to my children, my son and daughter both had these paranormal experiences when they were little. And I just realized, it's because you still believe, and with that belief comes all that universal wisdom.
Yeah, I love all of us. This has been such an insightful conversation. Rochelle, thank you so much for being here. Let us know how we can reach you. Tell us your socials. Tell us everything.
Oh, yes. So company's called Not Your Average Psychic. You can find us on Instagram. We have a website, notyouraveragepsychic.com. And you can find all the information on there for sessions, schools, retreats, yada, da, da, da.
I love it. All right, amazing. Well, thank you so much for being
Thank you for
here.
having me.
Amazing,
So
awesome.
nice.